Shavato Rabotai, Kalman Akiva Kovacs, continuing the Mishnah Yomi in the first parak of Kilayim. So we're in chapter 1, Mishnah number 4. Uva Elon, and for trees. So discussing what's Kilayim by trees with each other. It's a bit different than what we've seen so far by grains and by vegetables, where the Isser in the Torah is planting different species. By trees, it's grafting. You can't graft one tree onto a different species of tree trunk, even though after the grafting, those branches will grow fruit that's pretty much the same as it was before, but still that's the Isser D'Oraita, is grafting. So we need to know what's what by trees. Of Elon, ha'agasim v'ha'krustumelin. So by trees, the pears in the krustumelin, which is some sort of mini pear, which the Rav says is like a gallnut. So those are Kilayim. Ha'prichim v'ha'uzradin, and quinces and sorb apples. Einam Kilayim sebeze. Sorry, they are not Kilayim with one another. They are close enough to be considered the same species by halacha and could be grafted on each other. Hatapuach v'hachazrad. The tapuach is the famous apple, and the chazrad is apparently the wild apple or possibly the crab apple. It's sort of a miniature, more sour apple. And the Rash says it was used to feed pigs. Apparently it was like a sour apple. It's interesting to note that when we discussed in Pesachim, in the Gemara in Pesachim, we discussed the recipe for the recipe for charoset, and we said apples. We said tapuach, apples. And some of the achronim in recent generations said, we don't think it's an apple. We think it's something more sour, because the word used in the Gemara is kua. Kua is like a sharp taste or a vinegary taste almost. So they say maybe it's referring to something citrus, something that's not the apples that we have today. So it's important to realize the apples we buy at the store today have been bred, if not genetically modified, at least bred to be much sweeter than apples were 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. So it's quite possible that the normal tapuchim, the normal apples from 2,000 years ago, were a bit more sour or a bit more sharp in taste than the very sweet, commercially bred apples that we have today. So it's possible, in my opinion, that the tapuach the Gemara is talking about in Pesachim for Yacharozet is the exact same tapuach we have, the exact same species, but what we have now is that sweeter variants are much more common commercially, and the more sour variants are avoided. But this chazrad is apparently a crab apple, is a more sour, small apple. So the Mishnah continues, ha-parskim veha-shkedin. So the afarsek is, of course, the peach, and the shkedia is the almond, v'hashizafin, v'harimin, and the jujube and the thorny jujube, afal pisha domin zelezeh, even though they resemble each other quite a lot, Kilayim sebezeh, they are Kilayim. Now you're going to ask me, a peach and an almond, is that really the same? So it turns out when almonds first bud their fruit, the almond itself, the nut itself, has a covering which is soft and a bit like a small peach. And of course, if you open up a peach, what's inside? The pit looks quite a bit like an almond. So you see, when Hashem invented these species, he made them a bit similar in a way, where the Mishnah is going to have to teach us later, even though they do have similarities, they are Kilayim one to another. Mishnah Hay returns to vegetables, hatznon ve'nafutz. The tznon is a radish, the nafutz is some sort of elongated radish. A chardal v'halafson, the mustard and something called a charlock. Dulat yavanit, and the Greek gourd, ima mitzrit, v'harmutza, whether it's with a Egyptian gourd or a ramutza, an ember gourd. Afal pisha domin zelezeh, similar to what we had by the trees, even though these species are quite similar, a radish and a longer elongated radish, even though they look quite similar, Kilayim zebezeh, they are in fact Kilayim. Now our sages were going not just by the shape of the fruit, but also by the appearance of the leaves and the taste of the fruit. So there's different criteria. It's not just, what does the fruit look like and what does the fruit taste like, but also what does the plant look like, how does it grow, what do the leaves look like. So the determinants we have, as we mentioned yesterday, for what's a different species are not always the same when it comes to Kilayim. Shkoyach Rabosai, Shvatov Gudvach.